With regards to the following PSA, here are a few notable examples of when delegating responsibilities and powers from the President to other officials has been a common practice throughout the United States history. For example, Franklin D. Roosevelt. During World War II, Roosevelt delegated significant authority to various military and civilian leaders to manage the war effort efficiently. This included the creation of agencies like the War Production Board. Another example is under Harry S. Truman. Truman delegated authority to the Secretary of Defense and other officials during the Korean War to streamline military operations and decision making. Another example is Dwight D. Eisenhower, how he delegated responsibilities related to the national security and defense to the Secretary of Defense and other officials during the Cold War, particularly in response to the Soviet threat. And the fourth and final example, before giving you the actual PSA, was under George W. Bush. After 9/11 attacks, Bush delegated significant powers to the Secretary of Defense and other officials to manage the war on terror and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. The following is a public service announcement that comes from whitehouse.gov, dated July 9th, 2024. Memorandum on Delegation of Functions and Authorities under Sections 1333, 1342, 1352, and 1353 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024. Briefing Room Presidential Actions. Memorandum for the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Energy, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Subject: Delegation of Functions and Authorities under Sections 1333, 1342, 1352, and 1353 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024. By authority vested in me as President, by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, including Section 301 of Title III United States Code, Section 1A, I hereby delegate to the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Energy, the functions and authorities vested in the President by Section 1352G of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024, Public Law 118-31, the Act. B, I hereby delegate to the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretaries of State and Energy, the functions and authorities vested in the President by Sections 1352H4, 1352D1, and 1352E2A of the Act. C, I hereby delegate the functions and authorities vested in the President by the following provisions of the Act as follows. 1. To the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretaries of Defense and Energy as appropriate, Section 1333 of the Act. 2. To the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretaries of Defense and Energy, Section 1342 of the Act. 3. To the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Energy, Section 1352E2B of the Act. 4. To the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Energy, Section 1352E2C of the Act. 5. To the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretaries of State and Energy, Section 1352I of the Act. And 6. To the Secretary of Defense for funds allocated to the Department of Defense account, and to the Secretary of Energy for the funds allocated to the Department of Energy account, in coordination with the Director of Management and Budget, Section 1353D, H, and I of the Act. Section 2. The delegation in this memorandum shall apply to any provisions of the future public law that is the same or substantially the same as the provisions referenced in this memorandum. Section 3. The Secretary of Defense is authorized and directed to publish this memorandum in the Federal Registry. Signed, Joseph R. Biden, Jr. For Headlines with a Voice, this has been a public service announcement. This was dated July 9th, 2024.